In my last video, we took a look at how to use some very hairy stuff over the tune Well You Needn't. This time, we're going to take a look at a similar kind of chord progression, but this time it's in minor, so it's A Night in Tunisia. So I'm not going to teach you the tune. This video is for those of you who know the tune A Night in Tunisia and are looking for maybe a new way that you might not have tried before to tackle how to improv over those chords of the A section. It's a kind of an unusual way chord progression actually. So I just want to preface this by saying that this Barry Harris thing that we're going to look at here, it's not even maybe how he wants you to use this system, it's how I use it. It's my interpretation of this material, and it's also not meant as a hack or to replace some other method. It's an addition. So you should still work on all your chord scales, in my opinion, and anything you would work on. You should try it as many ways as possible when you're learning a new tune or how to improvise over a tune. So arpeggios, scales, chord scales, triads, triad pairs, pentatonics, all that stuff. This is just a different approach that is kind of fresh. So let's get right into it, shall we? So the A section consists of two chords and a bass line. So it's in D minor. It starts with like an E flat dominant chord. I'm gonna play along with my Muse score here, so it sounds ridiculous, but it works. So that's the kind of harmony. So it's a dominant chord, so it's a sub 5. It's like an A7 with flat 5 going to D minor. It's like a D minor 6/9 voicing. I think on the original recording they even play like E flat minor 6, E flat minor 6/9 chord, which is kind of weird. And then it's like, is it swung or is it even? It's kind of somewhere in between, right? That's where the magic is. And then the last time it's a 2/5 to D minor, but it's basically the same kind of harmonic motion. So in Well You Needn't, it was like the tonic, dominant, tonic, dominant. Here it's the opposite. It's dominant to tonic, which is kind of unusual. You have to kind of get used to it when you solo. We're gonna play E diminished over that E flat chord. So it's like a dominant chord of the flat 9. And then the D minor 6 voicing. And then I'm just gonna go up the inversions. E diminished, D minor 6. E diminished, D minor 6. So if I play the bass line, and then I play the chords. So I'm playing on the top 4 strings, E diminished. So the lowest one is a little bit, it's clashing a little bit with that E flat if I play the D, but it's cool. So just like we did in the previous video, I could drop any of those notes in the diminished chord and create a dominant chord. So it could be an E flat. If I drop the lowest note, I get an E flat, and then it would sound like this. I could also drop the B flat, and then it's an A7, which is gonna sound a little bit more nice. Not necessarily in this case though, because it's kind of clashing with that E flat a little bit. There are two more dominant chords, but they're not as relevant, even though you could experiment with those if you wanted to. You could also raise any of the voices in that diminished chord by a half step, and by doing that you create a -7 flat 5 chord or a -6 depending on how you look at it. So it could be a G minor 6 or E -7 flat 5. It could be an E minor 6 actually. If I drop the B flat to, or if I raise the B flat to a B. Now this is a little bit weird, but it works. So it's like if you're playing like this. D minor 6 to E minor 6. I think that's what they play, like the harmony of the original version of Summertime. Like a D minor 6 to E minor 6. Which technically shouldn't work, but if you look at it from a Barry Harris perspective, it does work. It could even be a half step up, right? Like I said, that's what they, maybe what they play. I don't know who the piano player is. If you do know who the piano player is on the original recording of A Night in Tunisia, well then you are more knowledgeable than I am, and please let us know in the comments. So I'm gonna play a half step above instead. It doesn't really apply to the Barry Harris ideas, but it works because of it's the same kind of motion, right? Tension, release, tension, release. And as always, you can drop any of the voice from those chords. There's so much you can do with this. You could create counter motion and all this stuff, or contrary motion. But one thing that I like to do is to play on the bottom set of strings. But the chord voicings get kind of tricky. D minor 6, diminished. D minor 6, diminished. So I like to drop the second note from the bottom, so the tenor voice, and I get these chords. Which are very kind of Django Reinhardt. I don't know if he played those kinds of chords that much, but when you play gypsy jazz, we tend to use these voicings. So now let's look at some arpeggios. In the last video we did this. So you could do that, but I want to look at something else because we already did that. I want to take this bass line with the motion of that bass line. The contour. So I'm going to play, instead of an E flat, I'm going to play E diminished. So it's E diminished arpeggio and D minor 6. And those, if I combine those two arpeggios, I get the minor 6 diminished scale, which is also known as a minor bob scale. So let's take that shape and play it here on the second highest set of strings. Diminished, minor 6, diminished, minor 6. So I'm playing one note, and then two notes on that string. That's the shape or the pattern. One note, two notes. So some of these fingerings get a little bit awkward, like here. But for me, it's much easier if I keep the finger combinations consistent, because it's easy to get kind of lost in this. But if you keep the fingerings consistent, I find it easier to keep track of like what am I doing. When you get comfortable, then later on you can start switching the fingerings up. So let's try that, these two arpeggios. Same thing, now drop the E to an E flat. So every time there's an E in the diminished voicing, I played E flat instead. And then I'm creating a dominant voicing there. But I find it's easier if I think of the diminished shape and then just drop that note instead of thinking of the dominant inversions, if you know what I mean. Also, combine them, so you play one on the way up and another on the way down. In some cases you could play then you get kind of that feel. So let's try to drop that B flat to an A, and then I'm creating an A7 arpeggio instead. Sounds like that. And as I mentioned, you could raise any of the voices in a diminished chord. Well, some are not going to make that much sense, but as I said, you could raise the E to an F. So instead of, you get that. Which is kind of like an altered sound, right? It sounds like A altered, so it's like a B flat minor 6. Which is interesting because the other chord is also a minor 6, so it's two different minor 6 shapes. Or it's like alternating minor 6 inversions. Let's try it, shall we? So I'm raising all the E's to F. So it's like I'm playing a G minor 7 flat 5, which is an A altered sound, to a D minor 6. as I mentioned, it could be an E minor 6, would sound like this if I raise the B flat to a B. All these combinations kind of work. So, like I said in the previous video, remember that this is just an exercise. You're not playing like this. It would sound ridiculous. So one thing you might want to do when you practice, so you don't get trapped in this kind of ding, 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 that chord by chord by chord way of playing. Play one chorus or one of a section like this, try different arpeggios, and then just play one, 8-bar phrase with just D minor, because it's D minor. The tune is in D minor, so you can play just D minor. You can play the blues scale. It's a little bit overrated, this idea that you have to play on every scale, the correct chord, the scale that corresponds to every chord. If you play strong and you play in D minor, it's gonna sound good if your playing is good. But if you never kind of outline the chords, it's also gonna be a little bit boring. You wanna find a combination of those two things. So I'm gonna play one A section like that, and then one A section just D minor. We shall see what that sounds like. So first 8 bars, just arpeggios. Just gonna play D minor. Arpeggios. D minor. So I was alternating between two different kind of ways of thinking so that I don't overemphasize the idea of playing every chord. You know what I mean? And you should also be aware of, even if you're doing that, how the notes relate to the chords. So I tend to think of this chord as an A altered going to D minor rather than E flat. I think this is A altered. So if I play D minor's pentatonic, this note, for example, C is the sharp 9. The A is the root of the altered. So I'm still aware of how the notes relate to the chords, even though I'm just playing a D minor pentatonic scale. All right, some more ideas. There's so much you can explore with this concept, but one thing you could do, right, is you can borrow a note from the surrounding diminished chord, or the surrounding chord. So if I think of the first D minor like that, D minor 6, there's a diminished chord and the same diminished chord, the same diminished chord, different inversion, surrounding it, right? D minor 6, D minor 6. This is an exercise I've seen gypsy jazz players do. This means that I can borrow a note, or any note, or several notes, even 3 notes, from a surrounding diminished chord. Let's say I use this chord, or let's take this one. I could borrow a note from the diminished chord above, or below. So if I borrow from here, could, if I borrow, I could borrow from on the diminished chord, I could also borrow a top note from the next voicing. I could do the same thing on the next string. I could do C sharp. There's so much you could do. They can go in different directions too. There's all this stuff. You can check out a YouTube channel called the Labyrinth of Limitations, where this excellent guitarist is showing you all these techniques to do kind of contrary motion and stuff like that. I'll link to that channel. What I like to do is go back to the voicings I talked about. So on the bottom set of strings, dropping the second note from the bottom, diminished, minor 6, diminished. Now what I like to do is I like to, let's say I'll play the top note from the borrowing from above and then resolving it. Minor 6 and then diminished. Or maybe drop the second note from the top or play it from below, borrow it from below. No. There it is. So I can create all this beautiful harmony just from like that simple chord progression, which is the kind of the beauty of the Barry Harris system. All right, that was my approach to using Barry Harris ideas. Again, I'm not even sure that this is how it's meant to be used. This is how I use it, okay? And how to do that over the chord progression in A Night in Tunisia. So with all that, I want to thank you for your time and attention, and I shall see you next time.